berapa lama ya? 1 hour. Today, we have a topic by Emeritus Professor Datuk Osman Bakar on Islam and the true meaning of freedom, or the meaning of true freedom. This is a topic that I do indulge in myself from time to time when I teach political philosophy. And always to my mind, the quote of Rousseau comes quickly. Man is free, yet everywhere he is in chains. And of course, this is something that has been debated from time immemorial, from the time of the ancient Greek philosophers to the time of classical Islamic philosophers, up to the modern period, and to the discussion of the social contracts by different scholars. And of course, the championing of rights. When we look at the current world order, when we talk about nation states and so on and so forth, we often tend to speak about freedom in relation to rights and a very legalistic perspective. So of course, I think today with Professor Datuk Osman's lecture, we'll probably be touching on all of the various components of freedom, be it spiritual or religious, political, economic, as well as social, and even cultural for that matter. So I think without further ado, I would now like to invite Emeritus Professor Dr. Osman Bakar to deliver his talk for about 1 hour, after which we will open the session to Q&A. I think you can either raise your hands afterwards and also write in your questions or comments in the chat box. So without further ado, I invite Professor Dr. Osman Bakar to deliver his lecture. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Daniel. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to everyone listening. Well, first of all, I'm very glad, we're all very glad that we are now in the holy month of Ramadan, and I hope that you all, everyone is safe and well during this holy month, and that we are given the strength, both physical and spiritual, to go through this month, which was alluded to by the Prophet ﷺ as the month of freedom. The month of freedom. I'll come to this, inshallah. So this is the 6th lecture, titled Islam and the Meaning of True Freedom. I just have one more to go, the final lecture next month. But for today, in the sense that what I'm going to talk about has been, in a sense, a revisit also of some of the ideas, some of the issues that have been discussed in previous lectures. So the emphasis here in the topic is about Islam and its understanding of what true freedom is. To say that there is true freedom is to say that there is also false freedom, or if you are speaking of freedom in an hierarchical sense, there are degrees of freedom. There are degrees of freedom, but we are interested in the highest level of freedom that is possible for a human achievement, especially at the individual level, because as we shall see, when we talk about freedom at the collective level, societal freedom, is somehow in other words, it is constrained by many factors. Right? Now, so basically, if you ask, what is freedom? What is freedom? Well, it is a term that is not many people define, because it is difficult to define, but we know what it means. We know what different kinds of freedom that are visible, that are pursued in society. So I think that's we know what it means, and since you are talking from the perspective of Islam, we are also concerned with words, with terminology, right? Now, in Arabic, of course, the freedom in general is expressed by the term hurriya. We say hurriyatul ibadah, freedom of worship, hurriyatul kalam, freedom of speech, and so on. But in philosophy, in the philosophical sense, I think which is really the essential sense of freedom, which is freedom of choice, right? Freedom of the human will. So philosophers understand, that human being, or man, is distinguished from other creatures because of his freedom of will, so-called freedom of human will, which is basically freedom of choice. And this is understood in philosophy, expressed by a technical term, ikhtiyar. So it's different, from the ikhtiyar as understood by the Malays. No, there's difference. It's just ikhtiyar is effort, but ikhtiyar is more than that. Now, the second point I would like to emphasize here is that when we speak about true freedom, as distinguished from other kinds of freedom, all right, or rather from what's called the less true freedom, or even false freedom, true freedom is spiritual, not physical. It is true freedom is spiritual. I will be explaining this. Inshallah, we'll go through the meanings of this, the explanation of the true freedom. Now, what I tentatively at this stage, what I would like to assert is that, and this will be repeated, true human freedom results from convergence of divine will and human will, right? That is from the perspective of Islam, right? There is a kind of this encounter between what we call divine will, iradah Tuhan, and human will, that converge, that encounter. So what happens in this encounter? Well, that opens up the whole subject of the human understanding and pursuit of freedom. For those human beings who already take out the factor, the divine will, say, for example, who don't believe in God, or for example, who don't believe in divine reality, then they have to deal with the issue of the human freedom without that factor, without that divine factor. And in our own times, in modern times, we have so many theories, so many ideas put up to talk about freedom. And certainly, the kind of human freedom, the human rights, and so on that's being talked about in our times, this is as a result of the marginalization or exclusion of the divine will. So this is very important factor, right? true freedom, true human freedom, is the freedom of man to be united with divine will. We have the freedom, human has the freedom, whether to accept or to reject divine will, right? But from the Islamic perspective, the Sharia itself, the divine law, is the concrete embodiment of the human will, and therefore the Muslims, from the view of Islam, and the Muslims will not be able to realize the objectives of spiritual freedom without the Sharia, without the divine law. All right. Now, in talking generally about freedom, let's just glance through, just go through, all right, the kinds of freedom. How many types of freedom that we can speak about in reality, either in the natural reality, in the social reality? What are these? How many types of freedom? So basically, I can think of there are four. There are four types of freedom. First, something that we see around us, of course, is what we call physical freedom. What I mean by physical freedom here is freedom of the physical mobility, or the body, the mobility of the physical body, right? So this is this freedom, which is valid to a certain extent, which is meaningful to a certain extent, because we see around us in the physical world. This is characteristic of animals and humans. Yeah. We see the freedom enjoyed, before human beings disturb the world of nature. Actually, animals enjoy their freedom roaming about in the jungles or in the desert, depending on what type of animal. So physical freedom is characteristic of animals and humans, also human being. And we, in a sense, okay, now we have the lockdown, we have the conditional control. There's a control of, in a sense, physical freedom also. Now we realize that our physical freedom is being curtailed. So physical freedom, yes, and it is, and this freedom is limited. That is the thing that is quite obvious. Yeah? Physical freedom is limited, and what limits it is nature. Yeah, both animal nature and human physical nature is dictated by nature. Now, so in the case of, it is interesting to make observation. Yeah, this is important. It teaches a lot. I mean, if we even if we observe the world of animals, yes, they have that freedom, because but then that freedom, as I said, was dictated by conditions in nature, certainly by their own nature. All right. So the animals that can, the birds that can fly, I mean, they have different area of physical freedom. Fishes in the rivers or lakes and have their own freedom. So what is interesting is this: what we learn from nature, that the physical freedom enjoyed by the animals is related to their environment, to their habitat. In other words, if only we can measure the state of happiness of animals, all right, if you can measure, then they will be telling us, the reading will say that, well, they are not enjoying now because they are placed in kind of environment that is not truly their true habitat. I mean, so they don't live really fully according to nature, because man has interrupted nature. All right. So in other words, the freedom there is connected, is identified with conformity with natural law of that particular species. It is interesting that in the Quran speaks about animals and birds as ummah, as communities like you, like human beings. In other words, the Quran used the word ummah not only to refer to human beings, but also to refer to other species, to other species. And conformity with the laws of that ummah, that's what constitutes real freedom, even for the animals. As in the case of man, of course, still we are limited by nature, but then the only difference is we are endowed with reason, and we use that reason to overcome many of these limitations. Yes, physically we cannot fly, but reason enables us to invent vehicles that will take us, that enables us to fly, and so on. Yeah. So in other words, reason, and particularly its product called technology, this somehow enables us to overcome many of the limitations imposed on our physical capacity. Now, the second thing that we know is based on experience that we can observe, is the freedom of animal desires. Freedom of lower desires. So in other words, the freedom to eat, to sleep, to mate, this is characteristic of animals and humans. But this freedom also is limited by nature. In the case of the animals, all right, that is by their respective nature, in other words. But these animals do not transgress, do not go against what nature has provided for them. In other, they live. The animals live according. They have for example, the way they eat, the sleep, the mate, and so on. All right, they have that desires. All this, this is limited by nature. But animals observe the limits imposed by nature. But in the case of human being, all right, they have all the desires and made worse because they have intelligence. So therefore, the intelligence can inflate the scope of their desires. But in the process, human beings are capable of transgressing the limits. Not only capable, and in fact, they do so many times. All right. So this, therefore, human desires, versus animal desires, all right, result in man transgressing the limits. That and this very important thing to be remembered when we talk about freedom, because for many people, human freedom is the freedom to give this and to express, the freedom to express, to actualize the so many forms of desires, and without any constraint on this desire. A position which, of course, Islam and also even religion in general cannot accept. In other words, the freedom of animal desires in human being that needs to be in a sense curtailed, or needs to be to be subjugated, or to be in other words, to be subordinated to higher purpose of human existence. So this therefore a question of limits. Yeah? And then the third kind of freedom is social freedom. By social freedom, of course, I mean cultural freedom, political freedom, social. I'm using the word social in the comprehensive sense. All right, actually, it's societal freedom. There's freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of press, freedom of worship, and so on, religious, intellectual. This is the unique characteristic of man. Unique characteristic of man. But it is again the question here. Yeah, what is certainly important is how to strike a kind of harmony between what I call individual freedom and collective freedom. This is the core issue faced by every civilization. Yeah, leading thinkers try to come up how to achieve this. So should we? Of course, the question here is everybody agrees in every society. It is agreed. Yeah? At least in principle, it is agreed that for the sake of law and order and justice, limits to social freedom need to be observed. Right? But the mechanism, how to achieve that, how to ensure that is achieved, is an issue in which many societies fail to achieve this particular goal. And therefore, for Islam, in other words, this is an issue in which we will not. Islam is saying that human beings need religion, need revelation, right? Need divine guidance, because the issues on how to achieve collective freedom, how to achieve collective well-being, when want to practice individual freedom, that is very, very problematic. All right. The question basically is how to determine the limits of individual freedom. If individual freedom is to be pursued by everybody according to the maximum, according to the whims and fancies, all right, then how can that be possible when at the same time you say there should be balance and harmony, law and order in the collective sense. So this is a perennial issue. And Islam, of course, came with the answer to this issue, that human societies need divine and human role together, not just one or the other, not just religion with no just role for reason, legitimate role of reason, or reason without religion and revelation. So this is very important concept. In other words, the idea of sharing, the idea of this encounter between divine will and human will, the idea of the unity of revelation and reason, right? The two playing their role together if and to ensure that there is social freedom in the true sense of the word. All right. Now, the other freedom, now the fourth type of freedom is spiritual freedom, which is also unique to man, to human being. Now, the difference between spiritual freedom and the other types of freedom that I mentioned is this: spiritual freedom is unlimited. The previous three limited, but this fourth, the last kind of freedom, no, it is unlimited. Why? Because God is absolute freedom, and He shares His quality of freedom with human beings. So again back to the same principle I used to be, as I used to say before, that man is created in the image of God. Man is a theomorphic being, therefore he has many these godlike qualities, and one of these godlike qualities is, of course, freedom. Why do we human beings have freedom? Human beings have freedom precisely because we are a reflection or the image of the divine freedom. Right. So, of course, I'll be talking more now, but at this stage, that's it, about 4 types of freedom. So it is remember at this stage that spiritual freedom is unlimited, all right? Simplified, religion is saying, okay, fear God, love God, know God, live in God. These are the keys to limitless spiritual freedom. Now, I would like now to talk more about this nature of human freedom, or what I call just now freedom of choice. Now, the idea of human freedom is explained in the Quran. In the Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 72, chapter 33, Al-Ahzab. Basically, the verse refers to the divine offer of trust, amana, and the offer of trust or amana to man. Interpreters, right? The interpretations of that basically is that let me read, yeah, so that the translation. I give you just the translation of this verse. God, we did indeed offer the trust, al-amana, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they refused to undertake it, being afraid thereof. But man undertook it. He was indeed unjust and foolish. Just to, in a sense, the Quran describing in the scriptural way what could be explained in details in the in philosophy, for example. What it means that the whole of creation, other than man, was given that trust, but they did not accept that offer, meaning that the creatures other than human being do not have free will, cannot exercise freedom of choice, because they were offered with that possibility, but they did not accept it in a human language. But in the case of man accepted that offer. For that reason, man possessed the freedom of will, the freedom of choice. Now, the material substance or object of that trust appeared to be for man to be God's creature, which submits to him with freedom. Every creature submits to God. The other creatures submit to God, but they do not want to submit to God with freedom. They want to without freedom. Whereas in the case of humans, we want that freedom. And in practice, what happened that some human beings fail to submit to one true God. But not to submit to one true God does not mean that they are not submitting to any authority at all. Yeah, it's just that the human nature is such that human beings cannot run away from submission. If human beings do not want to submit to God, then what happens is that this human being will submit to another, something else is other than God, and including, of course, to Satan. Yeah. So and of course in the context of the Quran, that human role to submit to God with freedom, to submit to God with freedom, is to be discharged, all right? Is to be charged in his capacity, man's capacity as God's vicegerent on earth, Khalifatullah fil ard. So that the offer to be Khalifatullah fil ard, all right, was accepted by a human being. Now, this, from the Islamic point of view, this verse has a lot of implications. There's a lot of implication for the idea of human freedom, and the implication of in the case of the management of our planet Earth, it is very real. So in other words, we have this something that is alluded to by the Quran, all right? Because of that offer of trust to human beings, now what we had, many human beings want to manage our planet Earth, which is basically the role of Khalifatullah fil ard. Vicegerent on Earth is to manage the planet Earth according to God's will. But now many human beings in our times want to manage, to administer, to govern our planet Earth without God. And that is the issue that is before us today. So from this point of view, we need to go to that verse and draw the necessary consequences. I would like to go back, since our discussion is about true freedom, which means spiritual freedom. All right. This is something that I would like to discuss for the rest of my presentation this morning. Basically, this is a very important subject, the subject of spiritual freedom, because how we understand spiritual freedom, or if you don't want to talk about spiritual freedom, that all affects all the other kinds of freedom. That is the issue, the problem. All right. People may not want to talk about spiritual, just ignore the concept of spiritual freedom. But from the viewpoint of Islam, to take out spiritual freedom out of the discussion would mean that it's going to impair, it's going to affect the very quality of the other kinds of freedom. It will affect in a negative way, in an adverse way, what we understand, what we achieve in terms of political freedom, religious freedom, and all the others. In other words, why we are having all problems in discussion with all kinds of freedom except spiritual freedom is precisely because the foundation, the metaphysical foundation, the spiritual foundation of freedom has been ignored. So it is very important for us to restore. We need to restore this idea of spiritual freedom as understood by Islam. Of course, other religions have their own approaches, they have their own understanding of spiritual freedom, but here, basically, I want to talk about the perspective of Islam. Now, first important issue talking about spiritual freedom from the perspective of Islam is about symbols. Yes, before going into the essence of spiritual freedom, maybe just talk about symbols, because these symbols are found in Islamic literature. The symbols have been in Muslim thought from the earliest time in history of Islam. Right? In other words, in the spiritual history of Muslims, these symbols of spiritual freedom are very, very important. So the symbols are not simply created by Muslims, but also based on the authorities. I mean, based on spiritual authority like the Prophet ﷺ himself. Now, there can be many symbols of spiritual freedom, but I would like to allude to 4 of these. I'm not saying that there are only 4 symbols to be found in Islamic tradition regarding the meaning of spiritual freedom. Now, first, the symbol of bird as the soul and the body as the cage. All right. In other words, this symbol was, for example, used by Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali wrote a poem, short poem, just before he died. You know, he seems to have he knows that he's going to die soon, and then he wrote a little poem. That the poem was put under the pillow, and later it was and found, and that poem is very, very instructive. Yeah? So he said, now the bird, he was referring to his soul. Yeah, he's leaving the world. He said, now I'm the bird that's out of the cage. All right, he's out of the cage, ready to soar to the heavens. So that is a very, very important allusion to true freedom. All right. So in other words, Al-Ghazali likens his soul to a bird imprisoned in a cage, the body, and now his soul is going to leave the body, not just to leave the body, but to leave the physical world and then symbolically to soar to the heavens. In other words, this conveys the idea. Yeah? So this story conveys the idea that the human soul is a prisoner, is a kind of prisoner in the body, and it's time to live. Of course, it is forced to live, but as I will discuss later, I also want to talk about. Okay, yes, I mean that is the final departure from this earth. But the question is, we are here on earth, and how do we deal? How can we attain freedom for our soul while we are still alive on earth? But anyway, I just want to mention to you that one symbol found in Islamic spirituality is the idea of the bird, the imprisoned in a cage. What should we do? Well, that is a whole story about the meaning of spirituality. Now, this the symbolism of the bird in the cage that finally is freed is based, actually is based, or rather is a paraphrase of a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which says that the world is a prison for a believer. Now, of course, talk about a bigger prison. Right? The whole world is a prison for the believer. Of course, I know some Muslims refuse to accept this hadith because, but for worldly reason, they rejected this hadith for worldly reason, not for spiritual reason. And now, if we accept this hadith, they will say, then this makes the Muslims forget all the world, leave the world to everybody else. But that is not the meaning. But it's not the meaning of the. That is not the understanding of the hadith. Yeah? What do you mean by the world is a prison for a believer? Well, I come to that, but my point here is that there is another symbol implied by this hadith. The world is a prison for a believer. Now, another one is regarding Ramadan. Again, this is hadith. In the month of Ramadan, said this hadith, in the month of Ramadan, Satan is enchained, and the gates of heaven are wide open. This is another allusion to spiritual freedom, and that's why I said that Ramadan is, in a sense, is the month of freedom. It's a month of freedom because month of spiritual freedom, not physical freedom, spiritual freedom. So what it means that the month of Ramadan provides so many possibilities, opportunities, occasion for spiritual freedom, as symbolized by the idea of the opening of the gates of heaven, because that is the real sense of spiritual freedom, to go to the next world, or to go to the spiritual world where the gates of heaven are open wide. And in contrast, here Satan is enchained, right? And the other one now is prayer is spiritual essence of the believer. It's another hadith. Prayer is mi'raj for the believer. So mi'raj literally means ascent, the spiritual ascent. Of course, you can talk about to ascend a mountain, to reach the mountain top, but here it's spiritual ascent. So the experience of the prophets in the mi'raj, and it is interesting that when he came back from the mi'raj, that's how he brought back the order, the command from God for Muslims to pray. So what it means that yes, Muslims could not repeat what has been experienced by the Prophet, but at least the Prophet provided something in its place, so that the other believer, the Muslims, can also have a taste of that mi'raj. And to have that taste of mi'raj is, of course, through prayer. Now, I mentioned earlier, okay, how to, if our soul is imprisoned, right, is imprisoned in the world, how can we realize our spiritual, are we able to realize spiritual freedom before we die? Before that forced, in a sense, forced freedom, but now to enjoy, to have the taste of this freedom while we are still being here in the world. I think that is the answer to this question. That is the key to understand the meaning. The world is a prison for a believer. Doesn't mean that believers are rejecting the goodness in the world. All right, the ni'mah that God provides in the world. No, it's not. It's not at all with that meaning. All right? But the question here now is that if what Muslims try to do, what believers should try to do, is while we stay here on earth, while we eat, while we sleep, while we have all kinds of other worldly activities, but somehow we experience that freedom. And that freedom is to transcend the world of forms in order to go to the world of the formless. That is what the whole challenge, the whole exercise is. So the how to realize? I think Islam provides. So Islam provides the answer to the question of how to attain spiritual freedom while we are still here on earth. In other words, I'm minded by one quotation and other somewhere, that for a true believer, if it doesn't matter to be imprisoned. The Malays, it doesn't matter whether to be imprisoned in Sungai Buloh or to be imprisoned in anywhere in the whole world, all right? Because the whole world is a prison. So, if in other words, if someone is put in prison for a just cause, for a just cause, then that person is a believer, all right? For him or for her, it makes it a difference, yeah. Whether he or she is outside the prison, but still in this world, because the world just happens to be a bigger prison. That's all. So it's a question of mind, the question of the mindset, how you look at your condition, at your own state of being. So, but Islam does provide the in a more concrete answer to how to achieve spiritual freedom. The key is submission to God's will. The key to spiritual freedom is submission to God's will, which is what Islam means. What is Islam? Islam means submission to God's will, right? So the product of that, the end result, right? The end result of that submission is another meaning, peace. Of course, what is the connection between peace and freedom? Well, my own understanding is that the idea of peace, all right, absorbs the idea of freedom in the sense that freedom would be integral to the idea of peace itself. So that I could paraphrase it in this way: the key to spiritual freedom is submission to God's will, and the consequence of that submission is peace, which includes the idea of freedom. Now, so of course here, as I said earlier, it is submission to the one through God and not submission to anything else. So what believers are struggling to do is to find ways and means how we can transcend the world of forms, how to go to the formless, the world of the formless, or the reality called the formless, and answer that Islam gives is through the divine law, the Sharia. Right? Now, as I see, all right, if that is the case, all right, in other words, Islam's approach to spiritual freedom is through the 5 pillars of Islam. What is the formula, all right, what is the approach adopted by Islam in order to enable its followers to achieve spiritual freedom? It is through the 5 pillars of Islam. So the 5 pillars of Islam, if properly understood, properly implemented, properly actualized, inshallah, we will be able to attain spiritual freedom. So let us go to each of these 5 pillars of Islam. You remember in that famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Prophet was asked, what is Islam? By the Archangel Gabriel, the Prophet answered, the 5 pillars, the 5 pillars of Islam. First, the witnessing of unity of God and messengership of Muhammad. There is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then secondly, to the 5 canonical prayers, to pray 5 times a day. And the 3rd, fasting in Ramadan. 4th, payment of zakat. And 5th, pilgrimage to Mecca. The exact question from Gabriel was, what is Islam? And the Prophet answered those 5 pillars of Islam. Now, of course, this is, most people understand, know this common knowledge to Muslims, yeah? But few care to reflect on this and to understand the implication of these 5 pillars of Islam for freedom. On the contrary, we have people who think that these 5 pillars of Islam, if you were to do it, that would curtail freedom. Especially those who are critical of Islam or critical of religion in general. How can you say that these 5 things will lead to freedom? They would argue instead that these 5 pillars of Islam actually curtail the human freedom. Freedom for them would mean to be free of all this, to be free of this obligation, to be free of all these obligations to God. But in the correct understanding, in Islamic tradition, if we understand the inner meaning of these 5 pillars of Islam, not just their outward meaning, then they will realize then these 5 pillars serve as the foundation for the realization of spiritual freedom. And since these 5 pillars of Islam are also pillars of society, pillars of Muslim society, Muslim community, what it means that Muslim community will be able to realize spiritual freedom through an enlightened understanding of these 5 pillars, and through sincere and constant in a consistent realization of this. Because of the time factor, just let me clarify a little bit about each of these, the connection between freedom and each of the 5 pillars. Let me explain the first pillar. So the first pillar requires Muslims to be a witness of divine unity and the Muhammad's prophethood. To be a witness not in several hours, a few seconds, occasions, no, to be a witness all the time, as long as we live here on earth, 24 hours witness. And to witness, how can we be a true witness? Because you extend the question of true witness. How can we be true witness of La ilaha illallah? The meaning, the reality implied by La ilaha, that's because that's divine unity. It's knowledge. We without knowledge, we cannot, we don't understand, we are not really true witness. So in other words, how true we are as witness of the first principle, that's true of the witness of divine unity and the Prophet as a messenger of God, that is only based on knowledge. Now, what does this mean in terms of freedom? Well, as has been said by many authorities, those who go into the inner meaning of this, basically, the first pillar of Islam is a statement of freedom from all forms of idolatry and slavery. That's what it means. Freedom. La ilaha illallah. We understand the meaning of La ilaha illallah. Only 4 words. If you understand the meaning, then we are able to realize all kinds of freedom. Of course, the climax, the crown is spiritual freedom. Because if we understand that, we will not perform false, will not serve false gods. Okay? We understand. In other words, we will be serving absolute freedom itself. So it's very interesting that when the conquerors of Andalusia, they crossed the Straits of Gibraltar, because they came at the request. They came at the request of the some people in Spain, in Andalusia, because a question of persecution, question of injustice, and so on. And why were they invited? Because at that time they saw that these Muslims, guided by the slogan, by the formula La ilaha illallah, they were, the champions of true freedom. In a sense, it really is real liberation, to liberate from all forms of oppression. That was quite political in tone, all right? But that's true. In other words, political dimension as part of that. This is true freedom. It's quite different. Much a vast difference with the freedom that America went to invade Iraq because they want to liberate, to free, to promise freedom of the people of Iraq. That's a far kind of freedom that was implied by the people of Spain when they welcomed the Muslim Congress. Now, the second one is, in what sense is freedom connected to the 5 prayers? All right. I said earlier that this is freedom from the world. In fact, it's freedom from the world. The 5 canonical prayers, 5 times a day, why do they serve? They serve to remind human beings, man, the believers, for a few minutes, forget the world, leave the world. So that adhan, every time they have this salat, they have the adhan. So the adhan is a call to freedom. How often do we think that the adhan is a call to freedom? We don't even care. We don't even listen properly. But then 5 times a day, Muslims are reminded of the call to freedom. But to achieve that freedom, what they're expected to do is only for 5 minutes forget the world. It is said that man is defined in Arabic as forgetful. Man is called insan because of is forgetful. They forget. Of course, in that case, is forget God and remember the world. In this one, is of course forget the world and remember God. Now, so the in other words, prayer, if we understand the meaning of what we say, of what we do, our movement and so on in prayer, then we really forget the world and remember God alone. We are having conversation with God. That will be a means of freedom. Now, then of course the fasting is the principle. Fasting in Ramadan is also related to freedom, but here is freedom from desire. Right? From desire. There's hadith we said that Muslims fast for my sake alone. It is true. Human beings cannot lie about fasting. They can lie about everything. All right? People can claim they pray because they have prayed, they are sin, but not really praying. They pray but are not really praying, or some other thing. But in the case of fasting, we cannot cheat anybody about fasting. Fasting is something that only God knows that whether we fast or not. Other people don't know whether we fast or not. But here, of course, it's about desire here. Fasting symbolizes that freedom from desire. In fact, on the contrary, we abstain. Abstinence from desires. It's the reverse. It's the opposite. Right? We abstain in our desire, and that is the is the beginning to freedom. In fact, if that is constantly done, that is freedom itself. And then 4th pillar, payment of zakat, that is freedom from love of wealth. It's another thing. We give a little bit of our wealth or our belonging, and that's a great sacrifice. All right, it means that we are not prevented. All right, or we are not because of wealth we forget about God. We forget about who we are. So yes, payment of zakat is connected to the idea of freedom, and in this case, it's freedom from love of wealth. Love of wealth It's mentioned by the Quran in several places. And finally, the pilgrimage to Mecca, if possible, is freedom. In this case, what kind of freedom? Pilgrimage to Mecca, freedom from all forms of particularism and sectarianism. Freedom from all forms of particularism and sectarianism. There's been political dimension of that. There are many who wrote about Hajj, the significance of Hajj. Yeah? Many, yeah? Even in modern times, all right? In other words, their experience of that pilgrimage to Mecca, what it means to their struggle for freedom, all right? So precisely because by being at the center of the world in Mecca, where all forms of differences, of outward differences, do not matter. Yeah, question of color, the question of young and old, from each part of the world, and so on. In fact, it's kind of denial of all forms of particularism and sectarianism. And everybody has read about the things that, for example, motivated Malcolm X, the late Malcolm X, or Malcolm X, what the Hajj means in terms of transforming him, yeah, the kind of new freedom. It's very important book, yeah. In other words, the kind of freedom that he has tasted and enjoyed as a result of going to Mecca. So, in other words, freedom from black racism. You have white racism, and now in his case, it's black racism. But Mecca, the pilgrimage changed the whole mind of a person. It's a kind of new liberation. So we can talk different kinds of freedom here, just based on this particular perspective that we presented. Okay, so I think it's been 1 hour now. So basically, I just want to repeat my earlier statement that true freedom results from the encounter between divine will and human will. When the two wills are united, and that unity is expressed through the human's observation, the believer's observation or implementation of the divine law, the Sharia, which is here summarized in the form of the 5 pillars of Islam. So these 5 pillars of Islam alone, if we understand the meaning, yeah, sincerely, then spiritual freedom will be there for us, yeah, inshallah. So thank you for the listening, and inshallah we have questions. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Thank you very much, Professor Osman. I think that was an excellent lecture. There's a lot that I gained from it. It's the only kind of tazkirah that actually works for me. This kind of intellectual food. So I was really thinking a lot about the positive and negative liberty that Isaiah Berlin was talking about, and when you spoke about the pillars of Islam as the spiritual founding of freedom, I can see even a paper developing in my head about how to relate these 2 elements. So it's probably going to lead me to writing a paper. Thank you very much, Prof. So now I open the floor to any comments or questions. So you're free to raise your hand. I think I'll allow for video expression of your question, and so on. So you can unmute yourself and start the discussion. I think on the Facebook side, if there are any comments, maybe Dr. Shahran can relay them to us here.
May I just say something?
Yes, Ravi, go ahead.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Good salam.
This is a very nice lecture. Actually, I feel quite speechless, because this is a beautiful time, the Ramadan, and you are explaining this. And really, when you talk how you bring it, the idea of freedom from the physical dimensions to the political dimensions, and then to the spiritual dimension, and then to the Sharia and the 5 pillars. I don't know what to say. It's beautiful. I think that's all I have to say right now. No questions.
I think maybe a question on my part in relation to this. Was this something that Prof. Osman, that you developed later on, or was this something that you were aware of in your younger years as well? This understanding of true freedom in the lecture that you gave today. Is it something that you developed over time, or is it something that you already were enlightened to many years ago?
Well, let's say it is part of my life history. In other words, I was searching for freedom. When I was young, I used to dream several times that I was able to fly. Have you ever dreamed that you flew? I did, not once, several times. So I don't know what it means, but later, when I get to see the people who interpreters of dreams and so on, they said it means that it signifies your love for freedom. Freedom to think, intellectual freedom, to think, to act. Right? So in other words, the issue of freedom was ingrained, part of my personal quest. So when, well, not all the things that I've been telling you just now, I got that and in one go, and it's something, it's a process, of course. It's a process. Yeah? But the important thing is that it is a very important thing. It's not planned, all right? It happened that during one Ramadan, when I was a student in London, I came the book of Al-Ghazali. That's why I read to you that point, and that was when I was young. I mean, I was doing masters, in fact. I was doing MSc at that time. I read that. And that, caused me to reflect, to reflect that point. Very, very short point. It's a point to talk about that symbol. The symbol, the body is a prison, is a cage. Okay, to use the word cage because it's referring to a bird. His soul is the bird now ready to fly to heaven. All right, that leads to one thing to another. So that, well, of course, before that, I was also in London at the time. Talking about the socialism, Marxism, they were far ahead than anybody else in terms of they talk about justice and so on. But that also led me to reflect the kind of freedom, what I didn't call false freedom at the time, but now it's false freedom. All right. So when the guerrillas, the Castro and Guevara in Latin America to talk about liberation and freedom, but then at the same time I'm reading Al-Ghazali, Nasser, and so on. The two clash. The two clash. So I have to come up. How to not to out of that clash?
This has to be your next book, bro.
Yeah.
This has to be your next book. This process, this journey of yours, it can be
yes,
easily.
It was a spiritual journey. Yes, of course, it was a spiritual journey. And of course, at our age now, the idea of spiritual journey is not just a metaphorical something. It is real. I mean, it is a real spiritual journey, and many things happen along the journey. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Prof. There is a question from Brother Nuruddin. Can you maybe unmute yourself? I know you wrote the question in the chat box, but feel free to ask this question so we can spark a better discussion. Can you hear me, Brother Nuruddin?
Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Assalamualaikum, Professor Osman Bakar.
So,
Yeah.
which Brother Nuruddin is this? Oh,
From
okay.
Indonesia, Prof.
Okay, yes.
I have two questions, Prof. The first is maybe unrelated to the lecture, but I want to hear your explanation. The first I want to ask, I hear from Suaib Ahmed Malik presentation, which state that you and Syed Hussein Nasser reject Darwin theory of evolution because you and Nasser clinging to the concept of Platonian form, which tend to be static and not because Darwinian evolution contradict the Quran and Hadith. I hope you can provide further explanation regarding Darwin theory of evolution from an Islamic viewpoint. My first question. And the second is I want to ask, how about the Eastern spirituality, Prof, which, for example, believe that spiritual freedom can be achieved by means of suffering. Does this have anything in common with Islam? Thank you.
All right, the first question is about evolution, not really about the subject that we are talking about, although I can still think about how the relation, but basically you want to ask about the Platonic form. Am I correct just now? Yes, because it's based on the Quran also. The Quran talks about the treasures, that the reality, the inner reality of things are stored in the Lah Mahfuz, in the archetypes, the IIIT, the Platonian archetypes. The Arabic term used by Ibn Arabi is Thabita. Now, the immutable. It means the immutable essences, all right? In the sense, the idea, we call the idea. So everything that exists on earth has its primordial idea in God's knowledge. So that one did not go any evolution. So no matter what kind of physical changes, biophysical changes taking place here, these are all different possibilities of the archetypes, the fixed ideas, in the divine knowledge. They're not going to affect. So to use evolution as an argument against God's knowledge, is unacceptable from the Islamic point of view, because it's the other way around, in fact. All right, it is God's ideas, the archetypes in God's knowledge that determines the different manifestations happening on earth. So it's different opposite, a contrasting thing. Now the other, you can, if you want to know more, you can refer to my very old book, classification under this critique of evolutionary theory. All right, I think which was translated into Bahasa Indonesia many years ago. You can refer to that. Also explain that. Your question is explained. The answer to that is there. Now your second question, whether spiritual freedom can be achieved. What's it?
By the way of suffering, like.
Oh, sorry, yes. For example, you have to refer to, let's say, for example, Buddhism, right? Now, thank you for raising this question, because I did not explain or express in detail the question of this, the role of forms in spiritual liberation. Yeah, I just mentioned that in order to go to the formless, the reality was called the formless reality without form. Still, we have to go through forms, because we live in the world of forms. In order to transcend the world of form, we still have to go through that. Yeah, But then revelation provides selected form. In other words, in the case of Islamic revelation, emphasizes certain form through which we can transcend to the higher world. Yeah, in fact to attain God. Now, yes, different regions have different starting points. So the starting point is that for Buddhism, the starting point is that the world is a source of suffering. Now, this may be compared to what the Prophet said, that the world is a prison for the believer. Right? The world is a prison for the believer. The believer wants to get out of that prison. Cannot wait until we die, but no, now, even here and now, we want to get out of that prison while still being in that prison. So it's very, very interesting. How can mentally, intellectually, we realize the state of being liberation from form, but physically we are still here on earth? And Islam does provide that possibility. So Islam is its own. But as the case with Islam always tries to maintain that two things. All right. In other words, the negative and the positive. In other words, Islam does not look at the world as entirely a source of suffering, but it is also a means of going beyond to another spiritual reality. Just like the Quran says, then for some people, for those who don't believe, the issue about using of symbols in Surah Al-Baqarah, the unbelievers question, what does the symbols mean? Yeah. So the Quran answered back saying that, as for those who believe, they know that the symbols point to something true. But for the non-believers, nature is opaque. But for the believers, nature is transparent. In reality, it is true, nature is both opaque and transparent. But the light of faith will make it transparent so that we are able to see what is beyond the natural world. But for those whose spiritual vision is already dim, they cannot see that. They see opaque. So, and therefore, for them, reality is the physical world, nothing beyond. So how does this happen? Then the same physical world, the non-believer, those who don't believe in God, those who don't believe in the spiritual world, will look as simply an opaque thing. There's nothing there. But for the believers, those who believe in God, those in the spiritual world, they see that the world actually is transparent. They see beyond what. So this didn't happen with the question of the source of escape. How to escape from this prison to go outside the prison. So Buddhism has its own way in its own as a point, and therefore the answer, but the end result is the same. The end result is enlightenment. But take it as that the world is a source of suffering, and therefore go beyond that in order to be to the world of enlightenment. But it is true, the Sharia looks at the positive aspect. To look at the positive aspect of the world of forms, because the same world of form can take us to the other world. I think this is my answer to the question. All right. This is of course a case of comparative religion there, and therefore the question here is about starting point. Same thing.
Okay,
question of when Christianity talks about that man's original sin. Islam does not start from that. Islam does not start from the idea of the fall. of man, but start from the idea of the original fitrah, that everyone was born good. Here's a question of different perspectives of looking at spirituality. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Prof. Sorry, Prof. It is the title of the book, Evolusi Ruhani, Kritik Perennialis Teori Darwin.
That is the title in Indonesia. People don't realize that because they change, they don't really translate the title. The title was Critique of Evolutionary Theory, and then they translate into Bahasa Indonesia and call the book Evolusi Rohani, something different.
Okay, Prof.
I don't know. My books, the titles have all been different, not really translated, but interpreted.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
We also have a question here by Brother Shahran. So he wrote the question, but I think I would rather a kind of discussion happen. So Shahran, can you ask the question?
Yes, Prof. Assalamualaikum, Prof. This is just a matter of this discussion. How do you explain or encounter Kantian approach that we have to deny knowledge in order to have faith, or we have to suspend our belief in order to truly understand God? Do we have this freedom in Islam? How can we go about it? How can we, and another question, how can we answer the question, if God is powerful, can he create object he himself cannot carry? It's just philosophical, Prof. This is normal.
Who asked this question? You?
Yes, I asked this question.
Okay. No, this I first encountered this when I was in Form 4. Form 4. So it's this example that you gave. Can God create something that He cannot? It's all playing with logic. This with words. Yeah. Why should I'm not going to answer that in a sophisticated way, going through all the sophisticated philosophical argument. It's all just playing on logic. Yeah. So I would advise the person who asked the question, to look carefully at the logical, at the logical soundness of this question itself. If you expect from me a good answer, then the question should also be good. All right? I'm saying this question is flawed. It's based on wrong assumption. All right? Just how can God create something that He cannot carry? Is it confident? If He cannot carry, then He's not God. Yeah. First of all, who is your God? Yeah. If your definition of your God is assumption God is all powerful, then of course he can carry everything. Therefore, there cannot be that he cannot. Yeah. So in other words, the question assumes one thing and then tries to show another thing which is the opposite thing. No. So in other words, that question is logically wrongly formulated. Okay. But the question was about what? Again, something like trying to play with logic. I mean, what? Can you repeat the beginning? It's about.
Oh yeah, the first one is more important, Prof. This is about Immanuel Kant. Always says that I have to free my mind so that I can have space for faith.
Well, you cannot exist without faith. Osman. Even in order to that again, even that statement, yeah, that statement is open to question from the viewpoint of logic. To open my mind in order to have faith. This question, to answer this question depends on what we mean by faith. All right. But the point is, at the earliest point, yeah, in other words, our own being and the very basis of our existence, the fact that we exist, that faith, the element of faith, is already part of our mind.
True.
See? Faith is a part of our mind. You cannot take away faith from one mind and that's it. It's something that you don't have, and therefore now you want to prepare your mind for that. No, but that's not true. I'm saying that the moment you are able to think, the moment you are conscious the fact that you have mind, you already have element of faith. Purpose of the faith that you are real. Question: are you real? Do I really exist? No, you have to make that assumption. We have to make assumption that we exist, that we are real, we are capable of thinking, mind. That is, but that's based on faith because you cannot prove it. If you want to prove it in the sense that people say that's what a proof is, no, you can't prove it. That's why we have the idea of kind of intuitive experience as already also as a part of us.
Okay,
This
Professor
kind of
Osman.
questions, this kind of basically is all based on the playing with words.
Sophistry, bro.
Okay.
Okay, there is a question from Facebook. So this is something on symbols in Islamic tradition. So this is by Aisha Rashid. She wants you to explain more on symbols in Islamic tradition. So I suppose this goes beyond symbols of freedom in Islam. So I think you can go beyond that as well. So explain further on the symbols in Islamic tradition. Or maybe the usage of symbols.
Yes, science of symbolism, science of symbols is very important in Islamic tradition. It is an admission of the fact that truth cannot be expressed in only just one way, in the logical way. This is very important. Let's take Jalaluddin Rumi. Jalaluddin Rumi wrote beautiful poems in order to express reality. To express reality through poetry, and poetry is often symbolic. Yeah, symbol. It is in modern times. The problem is with our modern times when we somehow accept only as real what we call facts. So we have the so-called symbols and facts. So symbols, because they are not facts, they are not meaningful. But on the contrary, if you in Islamic context, of course, it is related to what the Quran calls ayat, sign, because there's a large overlapping in meaning between science, S-I-G-N-S, science, ayat, okay, ayat, and symbol. Symbol can be also called rams. Symbol for example, in Islamic science, talk about the sky as symbol, or the color blue as a symbol, or water as a symbol, because these symbols are found in the Quran. Yeah, so that enables, but you cannot understand that unless we go to the inner meaning of that. So verses of the Quran have different levels, the external level, the outer level, and all the other levels of meaning. And that's why I had the question of ta'wil, the understanding of inner meaning of verses. But the whole world of nature is full of symbols. Yeah. Today, we understand, say, quantum physics, we understand the quantum phenomena and so on. Then it's necessary to understand this concept of symbol. So when talking symbol, the Quran talks about, first of all, natural symbols, symbols from the world of nature. The other one is symbols from the world of the human being, from culture. The Quran talks about also shi'ar. Shi'ar is another concept of symbol. That shi'ar, symbol from the world from the human world of culture. So that act, for example, the Quran talks about different kinds of shi'ar. That is science, symbol. But the point is, the symbol is defined in such a way that it is that which leads to a higher reality. It points to higher, symbols point to higher reality. And this science is both revealed, is revealed based upon revelation, but also based upon tradition of scholars of Islamic spirituality over the centuries. In other words, it was a very well developed science, and the meaning is not something arbitrary. Yeah, symbols have objective meanings, but in other words, they were not invented at whims by scholars. A lot of them based on tradition. So especially in the arts, so that in literature, in other forms of art, or in poetry, the role played by symbols are very important. Of course, symbolic significance. So therefore, for example, in the art of calligraphy and so on, the question of symbols also. In Islam, even the letters, the alphabets of the Arabic language, they are symbols. What does alif symbolize? What does bas symbolize? So everything is a symbol because the reality is different. Yeah? The underlying reality. Symbols point to higher reality. That's the important point that needs to be remembered. So this is different from the modern concept of symbols, such as mathematical symbols. All right, that is by convention. That's conventional. It's not based on the objective ideas that revelation has taught. Okay.
Okay. I think we have a question from Ravi. You unmute yourself, Ravi. Go ahead.
Prof, since Prof Daniel asked about your younger days, your own experience in gaining this knowledge, since you mentioned the time that you read about Al-Ghazali, the idea of the bird in the cage, and then you talk about the idea of how the bird could get out of the cage before we die. So what is your own experience regarding that? When did your bird came out of the cage, and what was it? What was the experience? If you can share with us.
Well, I mean, this happens to some individuals. No, some individuals. I know some. We have some cases of evil people whom we know. As if there's a nomination that somehow they're going to die soon. No. So, and in this case, Ghazali, he had that idea that he's going to die very soon. So he went to take wudu to make sure that he was took ablution, offer prayers, and then go to sleep. And he, but even that, even had the time to write a poem, to write a poem. Yeah. So it is another kind of knowledge. So of course, not everybody experience that, have that, but we cannot deny that some people have that. Yeah. Our former colleague at ISTAC, Professor Ajmal, so somehow he had that. Yeah, I mean, so he took all kinds of preparations, and then when he went back, he told his family that he's going to die. So a kind of was a shock, and that in the same day in the evening he died. Well, some people do have that.
Back on the question, because you are talking about people who actually went through a physical death, whereas in the Sufis you are talking about people who actually went through physical death, whereas in the Sufi tradition there is this to die before dying. That means that whatever. Yes, your own experience. I mean, with
that is different.
To leave the bird cage before you actually have a physical death. Do you have your own experience regarding that?
No, that is different thing. Die before you die. That refers to the idea of spiritual death. Spiritual death. Therefore, it is also related to the question that you want to get out of the prison, but while still being in prison. How to feel that you're out of prison, but you are still in prison? So, equivalent to that here, a kind of analogy, how to experience death, in this case, spiritual death, while you are still eating, not sleeping, the kind of human activity that we do every day. Right? So therefore, how to realize, which means is that there's a tussle here, there's a contention here, conflict here between what? Between our real self and our lower self or the ego. All right, which I talk here about the freedom of animal desires. All right, the actual freedom of animal desires is not to let our shahwat or our nafs go to the extreme, do all the excesses, but rather here, freedom here means that our real self should not be imprisoned by the lower nafs, by the lower soul. So prophets, the saints, the religious people, the really spiritual people, or understand, they are able to control, they're able to control the desires, the lower desires, so that they only take the minimum, what is necessary for them to survive. Because what is important is the welfare, the health of the real self. So the real self should be in control of the lower self, not the other way around. But for many people, it's the other way around. All right. So I think that was the hadith, die before you die, mean. Yeah? In other words, it's physical, it's spiritual death, the death of the desire, the death of desire. So that desires submit, or the lower self submits to the higher self. Okay.
I saw Michelle raise her hand just now. So if you would like to ask your question, Michelle, are you there?
Yes, is it Michelle?
Yeah, she raised her hand just now.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I think we'll go to we'll revert back to Michelle if she comes back. So there's another question by Nuruddin here. So it is something on the emergence of post-truth condition. Is it related to the wrong meaning of freedom, where everyone feels they have the freedom to accept and reject facts, including the freedom for each individual to disseminate the information they believe in? So he wants you to comment on post-truth.
Well, my first comment is I don't really like this kind of term post-truth and all, because if we allow this kind of terminology to go on, what does it mean? It means that we are admitting that now we are no longer concerned with truth, but truth, and I explained in my previous lectures, the concept of truth is very important, because God is the absolute truth. You cannot say that, if to say that post-truth means God is redundant. It's God redundant, because God is the absolute truth. And then of course you have the relative truth. So the Quran talks about the truth. The Quran is the truth from God. The Quran repeats many times that the truth is also one of the names of the Quran. Al-Haq is also one of the names of the Quran. So when people from other cultures want to use that, we simply say that we just brush aside. No, we cannot accept the concept of post-truth. I don't want to entertain it, because I don't accept what your idea of post-truth, because if our society were to make this something normal, everybody talks about post-truth, then yeah, it will brainwash us. I mean, it will, in a sense, erase from our mind the concept of truth. So that now we are now beyond that. In our time, we don't need truth. Yes, we don't want. And the fact that we have all this confusion, all these problems, confusions of the highest order happening in society, precisely because we have already erased the word truth. I've been complaining and criticizing him, in science. I wrote about, for example, of philosophy of science. Yes, modern science, contemporary science has deleted the word truth from discourse on science by saying that it is not the purpose of science to know the truth, which goes against the very spirit of Islamic science, traditional science in general, not just Islamic. So I will invite you all, okay, let us go and criticize back this concept from the Islamic perspective, why we can accept the idea of post-truth. Truth is perennial. Absolute truth is that. All right? To restore the concept of truth. If we really believe in the Quran, then of course we have to accept that. But for academics, for students, and so on, our task, of course, is how to respond, to how to criticize to these kind of claims. And all started with the terminology. It's as if something big, something grand, to talk about post, right? That is what happens in Western. Muslims, we do not, in a sense, periodize our history in all this post. I mean, modernism, postmodernism, now postmodernism, and post to the power of what? I mean, this is ridiculous. Yeah. Why should we? We should simply. I said we should respond back. Don't perpetuate this. Okay.
Okay. Michelle, are you there? Okay, she's still not.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to ask about the kind of extreme form of physical freedom they talk about a lot in the United States, like transgenderism, gender fluidity. And these things are really major issues in the United States and in legal matters and litigation and that kind of thing. And how does Islam respond to that? Because those things were not even, present until fairly recently.
Yes, I'm aware. This is all consequences. These are all consequences of the wrong understanding of freedom, of true freedom. Because once you remove spiritual freedom as the basis of all kinds of freedom, then the rest of the freedom will become more and more reductionistic and even out of hand. It's getting out of hand because freedom is already understood as meaning anything is possible. But no, there's in a sense not to play God, that anything is possible. But even then, in the case of God, yes, He does what He do, but it's still built upon knowledge and wisdom. The Quran emphasizes wisdom. So this is no longer wisdom. Yeah. So that's why I mentioned the first kind of freedom. I say it's physical freedom and freedom of the animal desire. Look, I mean, I belong to that generation. When I was a student in London in the late 60s, and for example, There was supposed to be a new age of discovery, in other words, to experiment. That's it. The age of experimentation, to experiment with drugs and so on. For what? For what? Freedom. So because some people have already abandoned religion, religion makes no sense anymore in explaining what real freedom is about. So people experiment. So you underground music, go to, how do you on high with all kinds of drugs, all experimenting, because they are looking for freedom, but they were not guided correctly on the understanding of the evidence. Some were guided, for example. So some people, some of the pop stars and of that time will go to India. We'll see that Maharishi, Mass Yogi, and so on, because they were looking for something. Yeah, they're looking for something, and the society at that time could not deliver. The people who matter, that is the people, the religious people, and this is what happened. This can happen to Muslims if religious scholars do not know how to address contemporary issues to meet the needs of the rural people. Soon they will dismiss the religious scholars. First, just as dismiss the priest. These people dismiss the priest, and soon these people will dismiss the ulama. Yeah, and you know what will happen. So it's very, very serious, very serious problem that we are facing. Correct understanding of freedom is very important. But of course, in the case of Christianity, because they do not have a sacred law like Islam and Judaism, so that and therefore the question of trying to how to go to the higher form by transcending the current situation, they don't have the means, or only by appealing to a general ethics, a general moral principle without concrete application. But luckily, unfortunately, Islam, although still we are worried because the Sharia is not understood in an intelligent way. People look only at the outer external meaning, at the formalistic. Everything looks still is the world of form. But how to go beyond form, how to use the Sharia to leave the world of form in order to experience the formless. That can only be done if a kind of liberating knowledge of the Sharia is also taught to our young generation.
Okay, Prof. I think we have about 8 more minutes. I have a question myself. When we talk about certain concepts, usually we refer to a network of concepts. So for example, if you talk about freedom just now, you referred to amanah, to nafs and so on and so forth. So in the case of communities or individuals who are deprived of the freedom to practice Islam, to do the Arkanul Islam, what are the other concepts that come into play in order to fight for this freedom and so on, Prof?
Well, I think in other words, what people can understand immediately is from ordinary experience. It might mean something like what Ibn Arabi said, or in other words, no matter, anything can be your starting point. Any phenomena can be starting point. Any in society, your experience can be. Yeah, but the question now, of course, you have to be guided. Yeah, in other words, using established principles, concepts, ideas. How to guide from that. Yeah. So for example, psychology. Yeah, certainly psychology, because it's a study of the experience, the ordinary experience of ordinary people. In other words, to understand the concept of, I know. I still assuming that we do not want to bring in the idea of God into the picture, or what? Prof.
No, we do. We can, yes. Yes, we should. My understanding is that we do bring the idea of God into the discussion.
Yeah. If the idea of God is accepted, and then we understand God has qualities, has attributes, right? Then we apply this to human being, because hopefully that person also accept the idea that a man is a theomorphic being, and having God-like thing. Then this idea that everything happens here on earth or in the universe because God wants to disclose his nature, his names, attributes to human being. So that, I think that is very important. I find that a very important thing, yeah. And then we can therefore address anything, yeah. So if that person has a kind of inclination, say, towards mathematics, for example, then we bring in the idea of God, who is the supreme mathematician. He has qualities in the Quran. He has qualities mentioned of a mathematician. Yeah, so that in other words, by looking at mathematics in nature and then looking at the qualities of mathematician in the Quran, so people can make the connection between God and creation. So that applies to all attributes. In fact, there is no quality that exists in the universe. There's no quality that exists unless that quality is already to be found in the divine in the divine reality. I think perhaps this will be something fascinating to people, so that he or she always feels that there's something to be connected. So if you are say an artist, same thing. God is the artist. How do we know that? Of course, both through revelation, but also through empirical study. In other words, of course, God can show his artistic qualities in the way the universe has been constructed, the way, for example, certain species of animals and insects and so on display their very artistic quality. So if you are a medical student, it's through medicine that also got that quality this is displayed in the world of nature. So in fact, I'm thinking, when I think of this at this stage of my life, I think we need to overhaul our whole system of education. Overall system of education now, let us build a new education program based on the divine name, based to make it more artistic, the 99 beautiful name. It's wonderful. In the 21st century, we want to come up with an educational program from standard 1 until the university, which talks about education based on the God's 99 beautiful names. Since the beautiful names cover all the professions of everybody, so everybody feels connected, rather than religious teacher just singling out, usually just pointing out God is powerful, God is knowledge, but God has many names. So I think, I really hope somebody can come with this very important program.
Okay, thank you very much, Emeritus Professor Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar, for, I think, a very enlightening community lecture. So we look forward to the next one. I think next month. Yes. So thank you to the participants and those who asked questions. So without further ado, let us end this session with the recitation of Suratullah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.